Well, good morning and welcome. I'm a couple of minutes late starting this morning. I do apologise for that if you've been waiting since 11 o'clock, but I am here now with Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and this is my twice weekly live webcast where I look at news, views, and biking tips too from time to time. So, what have we got for you in today's news? And again, quite a packed show. The sad news about Paul Smart's death at the in a collision with a driver making a U-turn, said to be in a rush. That happened back in 2021, but finally got to court. 100 rider safety posters are going up in Northumbria, which we'll have a look at later as well. Police riding days in Scotland are open for bookings. Better hurry though, because they're not very far away. The police are also looking for a bike stolen after a passerby asked the rider to have a go on it. You couldn't make this stuff up, really, could you? In my own observation, 5 out of 6 ground anchors were left unused by bikers parking in a bay in London. A rider was given a warning for riding hands off in Hastings, but might have escaped lightly. New battery tech could cut costs of electric vehicles significantly, as the battery price would come down by about half. And we'll have a quick look at a design monstrosity from Metorbike. Today's discussion point, we'll come back to what I was talking about last time, about the Warwickshire crash reduction data and whether a drop from 1 year to the next actually represents the effects of the poster campaign. And we'll also have a look at the Northumbria campaign, and again we'll ask whether or not it's really a resource sort of that it should be used for targeting bikers. I'm doubtful about the whole thing, frankly. So stay tuned for that. Who have we got looking in this morning? We've got Sue here. Nice to see you, Sue. Right, don't forget, in case you missed any of last week's items, they're all down in the preamble to the show. Now, there's always a chance, of course, that when I do post something, it'll catch the attention of both the Facebook algorithm and my readers. But I'm often surprised, of course, that sometimes I think I put something up that really will hit the spot and will get a lot of engagement, and it simply doesn't. And that is why I do suggest that you subscribe to the Substack newsletter. You will get links to everything I've written about over the course of the week. You'll get links to all those posts. Simply subscribe. The newsletter drops through your email inbox, comes out once a week, gives you the links. You just click on them and you can read. You're not bombarded with stuff that you're not interested in, and in particular there are no sponsored or paid for posts, no product placement links in the newsletter. It's simply a little bit about what I've done over the course of the week and links to what I've written about in the previous week. And that lack of product placement sponsorship applies here on Elevenses, of course, which is why I do ask you for voluntary support for these shows. You can do that by heading to my coffee page and buying me a cuppa over there. That does help me keep producing these shows and the investigative articles, which I do hope you enjoy, but it does give you the access to hundreds of past articles. So I do thank people who do support me on a regular basis, like Sue. So do take a look at coffee.com survival skills. It costs you nothing to visit and see what's available, and if you do find it useful, then just £3 for a coffee helps me keep coming back to you with these articles. Now, as I said, last week I took a look at 2 roads in Warwickshire where I wondered just how the Road Safety Partnership had decided where to put up this summer's Think Bike and Ride Safely poster campaign. Now, using a website which allowed me to actually pinpoint each bike crash for a decade, I found the road that apparently didn't need signs was actually a hotspot for collisions at junctions, specifically at roundabouts between cars and bikes, and the road that apparently did need an intervention wasn't basically a place where motorcyclists crashed in any number. In fact, I think there were 3 or 4, if I recall correctly, over a 10-year period. So I really do struggle with the logic of why they made that decision. Maybe they did better with the other roads, but frankly, I ran out of time to investigate. But this week, I continue to have a look at what they were talking about, because they used local data to declare the success of last year's campaign based on just 2 years' data. We'll have a look at how valid that is. We'll also have a look at how Northumbria has actually misused national data to support a local poster campaign. So that's coming up later in the show. Do stay on for that. I also, just one other thing to tell you about before I get into the news, and that is to remind you that hopefully may see a few of you over at Cassington Bike Night, which is happening tomorrow, 26th of June. Starts at 4 o'clock, so a little bit earlier than night, and sort of goes on till dusk starts to fall. There will be food and a beer tent. I hope people will be on the soft drinks at the beer tent. Certainly teas and coffees and things arranged. It's all funding, it's all charity driven. There is bike parking nearby. There is also car parking as well, so I'll be over there hopefully sort of soon after 4 o'clock. I'll be wandering around having a look. If anybody does pop over and they spot me, do introduce yourself, do say hi. I'll be happy to meet people over there and have a word with them. So that's Cassington tomorrow. And one more little piece of housekeeping before I move on to the news. Watch out for Instagram scammers. Now, I received a message this morning actually from someone I used to know, must be 10 years ago now, from a now defunct motorcycle forum, and they were asking for a vote to support them as an ambassador on some kind of social influencer program. And I thought it was a little odd, but anyway, I responded asking how the person had been and so on. And I got an instantaneous response. That was one of the things that really kind of flagged it up, because why would somebody be sitting there waiting for a post they sent me several hours ago ready to respond immediately? It's possible they were online, but it said their sponsor would be in touch and asking for my phone number, but no answers to any of the questions that I'd asked her about how she'd been. So that obviously set my scam radar off, and I typed in the opening message into Google, and yes, it was indeed a scam, so that's been deleted. Just watch out for messages from people you haven't heard from for years on Instagram. It could be a scam. Right, and so with that note, on with the news. Now, you may recall that motorcycling legend, and I don't use that term lightly, Paul Smart was sadly died following a crash on his Ducati in October 2021. Paul Smart was actually the dealer who sold me my very first bike, and I used to pop into his shop on a regular basis until it disappeared. He was 78, and he will always be remembered for his association with Ducati, specifically thanks to his win in the Imola 200 race in 1972. So what happened? Well, unfortunately, the bike he was riding, which was a Ducati, it collided with a car on the A21, which is the Lamberhurst bypass road I know quite well, near Flimwell. And the crash involved a driver, David Gladwell, 66, and it occurred after he followed instructions on his sat-nav and made what was described as a rushed U-turn. Now, prosecutor Martin Yale, he told the court about how at around 1:40 p.m. on the day in question, Mr. Smart was riding his bright red Ducati along the A21 as Gladwell was driving his Ford Fiesta towards London, and heading towards temporary traffic lights where traffic had started to build up. Now, he said Gladwell decided he didn't want to join the queue and performed a U-turn, crossing the double centre lines and into the path of Mr. Smart. Mr. Smart collided with the front near side of the Ford, was thrown from his machine and died at the scene. Gladwell later told police in a prepared statement that his vehicle's map was offering an alternative route. He said there was a gap in the traffic and he decided to turn round after checking for oncoming traffic before moving out. His barrister, John Dye, told Maidstone Crown Court he made a monumental and catastrophic mistake and that Gladwell didn't want to drive ever again. And he said he's tortured by what happened that day and he thinks about it every day and will never forgive himself. Now, the judge retired to consider the sentence, and Mr. Smart's son, Scott Smart, also a former well-known racer, of course, he wrote a second sentence asking that Mr. Gladwell not be sent to prison. Now, Gladwell had been given an 8-month suspended sentence, and he's been ordered to do 200 hours of unpaid work for the community, as he admitted causing Mr. Smart's death by careless driving. He was also disqualified from driving for 3 years, but doesn't sound like that will matter much. So, sad story. Sad to report the circumstances of Paul Smart's tragic death, and it does actually bring back memories of the death of Mike Halewood years and years and years ago now, who was actually in a car at the time, but he died after a lorry performed a U-turn on a road. I think that was in Fog, if I remember correctly. But as I said, it's something I've talked about many times with my riding tips. Looking at a queue, it's easy to filter past it, you think, because you're on a motorcycle. Watch out for drivers doing U-turns, and even if you're going the other way, be bloody careful, because these accidents happen all too often. Right, what else we got for you in the news today? Well, on the longest day of the year, the 1 millionth boxer-engined BMW GS rolled off the production line at BMW's Motorrad plant in Berlin Spandau, a line that began with the R80 GS, which arguably, according to BMW at least, created the new motorcycle genre of touring enduros. That's the words of Dr. Markus Schramm, the head of BMW Motorrad. It's also, by coincidence, the 100 years of BMW Motorrad anniversary. So BMW will actually be premiering a new version of the GS. It will be the R1300 GS. So that 800cc engine is getting on for half, well, it is more than half as big again, isn't it? And that'll be appearing on the 28th of September at the grand opening of the new BMW Motorrad Welt in Berlin. Now, intriguingly, the press release continues. In autumn 1980, BMW Motorrad presented the R80 GS, a motorcycle which combined two very special areas of riding for the first time, off-road and on-road. What began as a 798cc and 50 horsepower bike has developed over more than 4 decades into a fascinating high-tech touring enduro of the caliber of the current BMW 1250, etc., etc. State-of-the-art chassis technology, electronic control systems, ABS, traction control, engine drag, torque control, semi-active suspension, and very much more. So here's a question for you. Has the added capacity, has the added power, has all the added technology and the added weight made for a better bike? So you tell me, what do you think on that particular one? I think that's a topic that we could debate for hours, frankly. Right, don't forget you are watching my 11s show, and if you want to catch it, it comes out live at 11. I was a couple of minutes late starting this morning, on Wednesdays and Sundays, so next show will be Wednesday, and hopefully we'll see you there. If you can't make it live, make a note that you can always catch up on Facebook, but much more easily on my YouTube channel, Survival Skills UK. Don't forget that all important UK at the end, though, or you will be shown how to sharpen horses' hooves or something similar with a passing Boy Scout. Right, okay, so now last Sunday I talked about a poster campaign that has been putting up Think Bike and Ride Safely posters in Warwickshire, and I wonder what the rationale for 2 of the roads that got the treatment actually was. One was dismissed but had lots of crashes on roundabouts. The other that was posted had just 3 injury crashes in 10 years. So here is another poster campaign, and this one is going up. Just get a picture up on screen. There we go. This one is going up in Northumbria, and the campaign has been putting up more than 100 of these safety signs. They say they are strategically placed across Northumberland. Now, these are funded by Northumberland County Council, and the aim is predictably to save lives. Northumbria's Police and Crime Commissioner Kim McGuinness said, "Any measure that makes road users think and encourages them to drive or ride more safely is worth investing in, as it could save lives." And she went on to say, "This signage has been carefully rolled out along roads known to be danger hotspots throughout Northumberland. The signs show we're responding to community concerns about safety and will monitor their impact on keeping rural road users safer." So much the same argument for the Northumberland campaign as we saw for Warwickshire. And last week we indeed saw how I looked at two of the routes which were supposedly carefully chosen, and how they didn't actually seem to have the crashes that they were talking about. So anyway, we'll come back to this issue, and I'll have a further look at both campaigns in the in-depth section at the end of the show, so do stay tuned. Now, if you want to ride better rather than be told not to ride badly, the place to go, if you are in the east of Scotland, might well be this particular rider safety campaign. The link is just going up on the screen. It's Police Scotland, along with road safety partners in the east of Scotland, are holding training courses for motorcyclists to help them ride responsibly and reduce the number of crashes. So these rider refinement east courses, they're one day, they'll take place during July and August in Central and Fife and Lothian borders. Now, it's first established apparently in the north of Scotland, and it was the only course of its kind. So presumably they're not doing bike safe up there, that means. And following excellent feedback, the initiative is now being rolled out into the East Road Safety Partners, who are Road Safety Scotland, the Institute of Advanced Motorists, Scottish Fire and Rescue, and ROSPA. And the course aims predictably to raise awareness of the importance of road safety and make riders think of the personal consequences of taking risks. Now, it's led by police motorcyclists and accompanied by an observer from the Institute of the Advanced Motorcyclists. Course will look at key risk factors and provide riders with knowledge and skills to be safer. So you get demo rides or observed rides, you get feedback, there are vehicle examination checks for rider bikes, and an explanation of the safety checks that should allegedly be carried out before any journey. And any qualified motorcyclists is welcome to apply, but it does say priority will be given to those living in Edinburgh, Fife, Forth Valley, Lothians and Scottish borders. 35 quid a day, but you don't get a lunch. You'll have to bring that along yourself, or buy in your lunch where they stop. Space is limited, so do drop them a line. If you can provide more than one date, that would be helpful. And the dates of the courses are Bridge of Allen, 9th of July, 13th of August, and North Berwick, 6th and 26th of August, just over the border from England, isn't it? Berwick on Tweed. So there we go. There's some options to do some safety courses if you're up in Scotland. Now, sometimes I really don't think motorcyclists help themselves, and here are three stories in a row to make my point. Now, the first involves a stolen bike. The second is about a rider. The second is actually about riders who aren't using provisions for theft, to stop theft, and the third is a rider who managed to get himself stopped and handed a Section 59 notice. I'll explain what that is in a moment. So how was the first rider, how was his bike thieved? Well, it wasn't a sophisticated break-in with lots of security bypassed. No, nobody cut any angle grinders, sort of any security off. The rider actually handed his motorcycle to a stranger who just happened to be passing by and asked for a go on it. So the rider duly took it for a ride and of course never came back. Now, this pretty unbelievable story was published in the Newark Advertiser after police attended the scene in Newark at around 5:10 p.m. on Thursday, May the 29th. Helpfully, the suspect was described as white, in their early 20s, and wearing a blue t-shirt and black jeans, so that should narrow it down quite a bit. Meanwhile, PC Rebecca Skinner said the stolen motorcycle is quite distinctive in its appearance, so we're hoping that releasing pictures of the bike will help us track it down. So have a look at it. Here it is. That's the bike in question. The police don't helpfully mention what model the machine was. They just tell us that it was distinctive looking. There is apparently an aftermarket water pump on the side of it there, and obviously the red pipes are aftermarket. So there's a few bits and pieces which might help you spot it, but it'd be helpful if anybody said what it was. But the interesting thing, of course, is if you'll notice that there is no number plate or tail light on this bike. Now, you don't technically have to have a tail light, but you do have to have a brake light, and of course number plates are mandatory. So I am wondering if the rider is now being quizzed on just why he was riding what is clearly an unregistered bike on the road. So, second story, we know thanks to statistics that most motorcycles that are stolen are actually small capacity bikes. Many are simply pushed away from the location where they are parked. So what do the council helpfully do to let us keep hold of our bikes? Well, some of them at least go as far as putting down things like these. They are ground anchors. And if you look carefully, you can see that the bike in the middle of the picture there has in fact, the rider has in fact popped his chain through the ground anchor to make it just a little bit more tricky for thieves to simply break the steering lock and push the bike away. Unfortunately, his bike wasn't the only bike in the bike lock. I did actually take a photograph from the opposite angle, but for some reason it didn't come out. But none of the other 6 bikes in the, or 5 bikes actually, in the bike rack there were actually secured against the ground lock. So a couple of them actually had a padlock and chain around the rear wheel, but nobody bothered to pass it through the ground anchor. Now, it's baffling really, because it won't make the bike thief proof obviously, but it certainly makes it a lot more difficult for thieves to make the kind of smash and grab raid that I've shared with you on recent shows, where they simply break the steering lock and wheel the bike away. And some of those bikes are obviously parked there on a sort of more than just for a few minutes, bike carefully covered up with a bike cover, for example. It beggars belief, really. Riders across the country constantly demand that something is done about bike theft, and that we get riders' rights organisation on the case. We write to councils. We complain that the police aren't doing enough, and it's hard enough to get the authorities to listen to our concerns as riders. It's harder yet to get them to spend money. Yet here we are with money being spent on bike security, and what happens? It's almost as if the riders want their bikes to be rolled away. Right, on to our third example here. Now this one is about a motorcyclist who was spotted riding along the A259 in Hastings whilst waving his hands, quote, as if he was dancing. Now police officers spotted the rider of the white Honda MSX 125, that's one of those little Groms I believe, riding with no hands on the bars on Monday, June the 19th. After stopping the rider at the side of Grand Parade, which is a busy street, pretty much runs along the seafront in Hastings, so at this time of year it's packed with pedestrians and what have you crossing the road. He got a section 59 warning along with some words of advice. Quote, while we do appreciate the happy disposition of the rider, riding a motorbike without hands on the controls is unsafe, reckless and putting other road users at risk. Now, what's the section 59 warning? Well, it can be used where a vehicle is found to have been used to cause distress, alarm or annoyance, or used in an antisocial manner. In general, the warning can last up to 12 months, and if a second section 59 warning is issued within the 12-month period, the rider could have his bike seized. Now, there will undoubtedly be people listening to this story, or having read it elsewhere, who will be talking about police jobs worth stopping a rider doing nothing really wrong. And I'll admit I've been known to take my hands off the bars, stretch my arms, flex my shoulders, but on a busy street, no, not really at all. Where anything could happen, I honestly prefer to keep my hands on the bars, ready to swerve my fingers near the front brake, just in case. But whilst looking at the photo of the rider having been pulled over at the side of the road, and wondering what they were talking about, here's the photo that was put out. I noticed a couple of things that might have attracted PC Plod's attention. Now, first thing I noticed is that the bike has no mirrors. Now, mirrors aren't absolutely essential, but they are something that obviously help you see behind. For example, the rider might have realised he was being followed by a police car for having a hand-waving jig on the bike. And the second thing that I noticed is the helmet. The visor there doesn't look particularly legal. It looks like quite a dark tint to me. I don't recognise the make of the helmet either, but if it's a recent helmet certified to ECE 2206, then that helmet cam on the chin bar is also illegal. Check out the rules and regs referring to the new helmet standard. So maybe the rider actually got off fairly lightly just with a sort of a talking to and a written warning, what is effectively a written warning. Kevin's looked in. Kevin says, good to see council providing anchors. I'd like to see more of these provided by councils, parking providers, businesses and landlords. Yes, so would I. But how are we going to persuade people to use the darn things? That's a question, isn't it? So, right, there's another debate point for you today. Now, Volkswagen and a technology partner have mastered a battery manufacturing process called dry coating. And what they say is if it's scaled up, it could cut the cost of cell production by hundreds of millions of euros a year. Now, the car maker is working with a printing press manufacturer, Koenig and Bauer AG, on the technology, and they said they have now perfected the procedure for both the positive and negative electrodes. No one else can do this today, battery chief Thomas Schmal said at a media roundtable. Now, in traditional battery manufacturing, materials for the cathode, that's the positive electrode. No, it's all. Is it? Hang on a minute. Have they got that the right way round? Never mind. Whatever it is, they say the cathode is applied to a carrier foil via a chemical paste mixture that needs to dry, requiring high amounts of energy. Now, dry coating eliminates that step with an adhesive that does not require drying. Tesla apparently obtained a similar process by buying a startup called Maxwell Technologies in 2019, but they have so far only been able to dry coat the anode, and they are still having issues trying to do the same with the cathode. Now, Volkswagen said it's actually produced several hundred cells with its method on a pilot production line, and they believe they can scale this up to full production by 2027. That still seems quite a long time to me. Anyway, together with the scaled up production and the cheaper raw materials, the car maker hopes that the procedure will bring down the per cell cost by around 50% by the time it appears. Now, what have I also got to say? Yes, Kevin's just said about the police stop. Police do sometimes react to factors such as just mentioned. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm sure if you see a bike in front of you with no mirrors on, you will instantly take a little bit more interest in it than if the rider is aware of your presence behind it. So anyway, motorcycles, talking motorcycles with mirrors, this one does have motorcycles, but for everything else I suspect it's one of the pieces of ridiculous design. It's just, see, I don't understand it when it comes to electric motorcycles. Designers seem to be wanting to make something that looks as little like a motorcycle as possible. So here's the latest entry in the crazy design charts. This is apparently the work of two friends who are allegedly both engineers, but they built it in their granddad's workshop in Hamburg. So let's have a look at the Metorbike. That is it. Let's zoom in a little bit so you can see it a little bit more clearly. Okay, so now in case you're wondering, it is a moped. It's all electric. It's powered by a 2 kilowatt brushless DC motor that makes a claimed 2.72 horsepower. That's presumably the sustained output, because it says peak power is rated at 7 kilowatts, which is 9.3 horsepower, and of course that's way over the limit for a moped, but apparently you can get away with that under the rules at the moment. So the underbone frame that you can see there is actually claimed to come from a Puch AX50 moped. However many of those there are lying around, I have no idea. Now, there do seem to be visual similarities, but unless the production version comes with a different shaped frame from these ones in the photograph, I can't see that the Puch frame is actually the same. Similarly, the front fork is supposedly from an Aprilia 125S, and I would wonder where they are sourcing those from. The 11.8 kilogram battery is claimed to be made from recycled materials, and it's said to be a lithium nickel manganese oxide composite, and it says to give the bike a claimed range of about 60 kilometers, 37 miles, so typical short range in town stuff. Extra batteries are available to purchase. Now, the battery weighs in about 12 kilos. That may not be particularly heavy, but it is generally accepted when you design a bike that you want to keep mass relatively low, and since the bike only weighs a claimed total of 76 kilograms, the battery accounts for 1/6 of the machine's total mass, which is quite a big chunk. So, in case you're wondering if the battery is already removed from the machine in the picture there, from that vast empty space under the tank, you would be wrong. The battery actually lives under a flap in the tank. So basically it means you're designing a bike with a heavy component carried about as high as you can get it. It also means, of course, that you can't use the tank space for storage, something that would be extremely useful on a bike that's clearly going to do short trips in towns and cities. So what else could you do to make the machine almost unusable? Well, first, one thing you could leave off would be mudguards. There is no front mudguard on this machine, and last time I checked, it does rain in Hamburg. You could also make a plank of a seat. There we go. The indicators are tiny. They might as well have left those off too. The seat obviously has minimal padding. It's square. It'll fit riders with a Lego shaped backside, I guess, but nobody else, and you could make it out of wood if you really wanted to. Now, there's nothing wrong with wood as a structural material, but de Havilland proved that 80 odd years ago with the Mosquito, and it can also be aesthetically pleasing as the sort of walnut dash on a classic car proves. But why make the seat hump from wood? It beats me. And if we move on a little bit, we see what is the engine, and you'll notice it has the look of a fake sort of laid down air cooled ICE engine. If you look closely, you'll even see there's a fake plug cap sort of on it. Mind blowing. And then just to round it all off, you've got that what is probably fake carbon fiber, which bolt up sort of expansion chamber thing. So what does that do? Well, believe it or not, it allows the Metorbike to replicate engine sounds. Now, the stock Metorbike comes with just a single sound profile, which quote, imitates a simple combustion motorcycle engine. But if you choose the multi-sound pack, which naturally is available at extra cost, you can choose between various sounds, which for some bizarre reason includes V6, V8 and V10 engine noises. And just in case you miss the sensation of shifting gear, the premium pack also gives you some extra noise, which imitates the sound of a bike shifting gear. So if you've got a bit of practice, you can probably sound like a Hollywood stuntman soundtrack as you shift up and up and up and up the gearbox and never come back down it again. Now, rather mysteriously, the press blurb says that the bike is built in collaboration with the purchaser. So whether that's built as a kit and you have to put it together yourself, I have no idea. But it will set you back £7,749 for the founder edition of these bikes. Just 50 to be made of the base model. If you want one, you've got this file listening to it. You probably want to know about the other standard features: keyless ignition, digital dash with a touch screen. I wonder how well that will hold up if it's constantly sprayed from the front tyre with no mudguard. And if you've got cash to burn, you can opt for milled aluminium switchgear instead of standard plastic, engraved grips to match your saddle, a bar end side mirrors which are slung under the bar, of course, GPS tracker, full leather seat, special finishes, even an illuminated tank sign. What's missing appears to be a number plate holder, and I didn't see a horn button or a rear reflector either. So whether they're legal, who knows? Right. Aaron says wood is a composite after all. Yes, right, okay. Anyway, right, on to the final in-depth section of the show. I seem to be running a little bit late on this. Now, last Sunday, as I said, I was talking about the roads chosen for the latest Warwickshire campaign, where they've been putting up Think Bike and Ride Safely posters. And I wondered why the posters were going up on roads. Well, there didn't seem to be any evidence that they were needed in one case, and not put up on another road where it looked to me like they very much were needed. But hey ho, I based Monday's comment piece on the ELEVENSES article, and I really thought it would get some engagement, since I definitely thought a lot more riders would have something to say about how these poster campaigns are actually targeted. But anyway, either no, it wasn't interesting enough, or Facebook just chose not to spread it around. I don't know. But anyway, I'm back for more. So let's have a look at a Northumbria campaign that trots out, as usual, the tired old statistics to prove that motorcyclists need help to keep themselves safe. And then we'll have a look in a minute at the Warwickshire safety partnerships, whether they are right to claim success based in a drop in casualties from one year to the next. So we'll start with Northumberland. Now, this time, the justifying statement is that in 2021, a total of 310 motorcyclists died on UK roads. Well, let's point out two things. Firstly, using the national figure for rider fatalities has no relevance whatsoever to what goes on in Northumbria. Though every single death is something we should be aiming to avoid, very few riders are actually killed on Northumbria's roads. I could only find data going as far forward as 2018, but going backwards essentially over the 5 years 2014 to 2018, the average is just over 5 riders per year, with around 100 seriously injured. Now that's from the Stats 19 data submitted by the police to the DFT. But it's pretty obvious, isn't it, really? If you say that 5 riders died in a previous year, or that's the average, it's got far less impact, particularly for people reading in the newspaper, than seeing it the number 300 plus. The second claim they made was that there was a 9% increase in rider fatalities. Now again, 9% of 5 is a tiny increase. I mean, it's just, you know, 1 up from 5 would be a 20% increase, wouldn't it? So again, national figures they used from 2021. Now I'm really fed up with having to explain that using data from 2020 and then claiming that things got much worse in 2021 is a completely fallacious claim. 2020, in case anybody has forgotten, was lockdown year, and of course road traffic fell back significantly, and so did traffic casualties, motorcyclists included. With restrictions easing in 2021, not surprisingly, road traffic went up again, and so casualties also rose. So it's not suggesting that this is a trend. So we have to place that in context with what's really been happening. And if you go and look at the data from 1980, you'll find that there has actually been a steady reduction in the number of motorcyclists being killed and injured on the roads right across the UK. So back to Warwickshire. Sally Rolfe, you'll remember, she was putting the signs up with her fellow Warwickshire Police Traffic Management Advisor, PC Grant Dumbleton, she said, was also encouraging that only 2 of the previous year's hot routes for motorcycle casualties still featured in the top 6, and she mentioned the A46 and the Foss Way. We hope this means that the signage and other initiatives at Bike Safe and Project Edward Bike event in April are starting to make a difference. Well, dare I mention the phenomenon of regression to the mean? And here is a diagram which shows you precisely what I'm talking about. Within most data sets, there is natural variation. So you'll often get most data points which are clustered around the average number, the mean, and occasionally you'll get a blip where numbers are quite a bit higher or maybe lower than normal. The problem is this: if you identify the blip as a specific problem, and you look at that and you think, well, that's when we need to pay some attention to the area, and the intervention is needed, such as you would do when looking at which road to target based on a single year's data, particularly when numbers are so small, then there is a very good chance that the following year the numbers will simply drop back to where they started. And it's based on the data points, based on those 2 data points alone, it'll look like your intervention has actually done something. But looking at the broader, longer term picture, it's pretty clear what's happened. It's simply regressed towards the mean, and that's what this phrase means. With an unusual number like that drops back or climbs back towards where it's always been. So it's not the intervention that's working, it's simply the law of statistics, and that's almost certainly what happened in Warwickshire. Right, so to turn that off for a moment, the fact is making decisions based on just 1 or 2 years worth of data is pointless, and I would say it's a waste of resources, and at worst it's misleading. So regression to the mean is, not to put too fine a point on it, an essential concept that anyone considering a road safety intervention really ought to have on a poster up on their own wall. Now back to the north of England. To be honest, I'm sometimes less shocked at the scale of the problem than the scale of the response. So on Easter Sunday, police from Northumbria, Cleveland, Humberside, Lancashire and Cheshire, as well as North Yorkshire, West Yorkshire, and you probably guessed by now, South Yorkshire, were out and about around popular bike meeting spots. And what was described as 215 engagement opportunities took place. So that brought about 3 arrests in South Yorkshire for suspected stolen motorcycles, all good. 19 people given an educational course for offences including excess speed, careless driving and illegal registration plates. 5 road users reported for summonses for offences including excess speed and careless driving. 62 traffic offences reported for offences including contravening a solid white line, careless driving, illegal registration plates and using a mobile phone while driving. So clearly that wasn't a motorcyclist. So why is it included in these figures? 45 verbal warnings. Well, I'm guessing that it probably wasn't a motorcyclist, so this could have been a Deliveroo rider, I suppose, but more likely it was a driver who was spotted. 45 verbal warnings given for offences including careless driving, excess speed, illegal registration plates. I imagine they found a few of those, and using mobile phone while driving. So that's a total of 113 interventions of some sort. And I can't even begin to imagine how much all that cost, all to deal with, to pinch another of Northumbria's worn out stats, riders who make up less than 3% of the vehicles on our roads. So suddenly the funding for more than 100 road safety signs specifically aimed at motorcyclists and seems like finding the cash for an extra packet of peanuts at a banquet, quite frankly. Ultimately, though, everything comes back to the decision making and the data that justifies spending enough cash for 2 people to zip tie cardboard signs to roadside poles, or diverting virtually all the police bikes, I suspect, across 8 police forces to rock up at popular bike meets. And that's where I ask, are the road safety partnerships simply scientifically illiterate, or I say, are they guilty of some kind of imbecile cunning which trots out all the right science but not necessarily in the right order? What do you think? I'd be fascinated to hear your viewpoints. Right, I've rabbited on enough. We've got a couple of extra comments. Kevin says, insurers could stick 3-liner advice wording in policy inception or renewal documents. Well, they could. They could also make it a condition of your insurance that your bike is properly secured. But do you know what? I don't like that path, because basically it leads eventually to insurers refusing to insure motorcycles. Aaron says wood is a composite. Yes. Excellent point. And Kevin says, I want a ticket for a constructive debate between Sally and Kevin. Read data relevance. And somehow I don't think you get one. All right, okay, that is it from me today. Thank you very much again for looking in. I always appreciate those who watch live or watch on catch up. Don't forget, I will be out and about on Monday over at Cassington in the afternoon, early part of the evening. So if you do happen to pop over there, maybe let me know before you go via email or something, and I'll try and arrange a meet point. Or if you spot me wandering around, do pop over there and say hello. And if you are out on your bike, it is another gorgeous day today, another quite warm day, a little bit cooler tomorrow hopefully. And if you're enjoying the sunshine, do stay shiny side up.